Just
Yes.
us.
Yep.
This is enough people for book club.
It is more than none, in fact.
Is more than none. So, what is it? It's been a couple of months since we read the book. But if I
Yeah, it
remember
has.
correctly, yeah, it has. But if I remember correctly, we hadn't gotten too far into like actual. I feel like we weren't really into much of the actual content of what he wanted to say in the book, and that he was just sort of prefacing it with stories about why it's important, or that this is
Yeah.
an issue to begin with, to justify why he wrote it. And now this chapter feels like we're actually getting into, well, how do people get into that position in the first place?
Mm-hmm.
The initiation. And I didn't highlight things. I always drew this on my tablet, so
Ah.
uh, it's okay. Well, I'm just gonna have to go through and like hope I remember because I read it recently. Um, there were a few really nice descriptors. I think again he makes these nice. He puts thought into how he words things, which is great. Um, this definition of initiation in the first place, I really liked. Here
Mm-hmm.
I'm just at the start of the chapter. It says it is the passage through a difficult task by which our heart is matured.
Yeah.
Look at
I do
that.
like his wording
Interesting.
there.
It forces upon us a shift of identity in which we can transcend our small sense of self, release what is called the body of fear, and awaken an undying wisdom, love, and fearlessness.
Well, and
This
he
is nice.
just yeah, and I like that he kind of defines like, all right, well, what do I mean by initiation? If like on that bottom right paragraph,
Mm-hmm.
it says, but more commonly, initiation tells an intense, radical, and rapid change. And I like that he takes a moment to explain that concept of like, all right, well, what do I mean by all this?
And then actually elaborates on it too. Like we have a generic description here, and then more specific examples several times throughout the chapter later,
Yeah.
which left me feeling really actually quite good. Sometimes when we read about different teachers or how they approach things and they act as if like this is the way, this is the only way, you have to do this way, and if you don't then you're not really doing it. And I really strongly dislike and disagree with that approach. I understand the
Mhm.
I did understand like the dedication and faith in it and discipline. We get ultimately trying to teach a discipline and say you need to be committed to this like fully, and you're not going to want to do this thing, but to say this is the only way that it's possible to achieve it, it's just really, out of all the thousands of years of people doing this, this is the only
You
way.
think this is the only way?
Yeah, I don't like that, and I appreciate that in this text he really seems to understand like there's a common thread among
Mhm.
all of the different practices that people do and the reason why they're doing it. And ultimately, this is what they're trying to accomplish, or this is the reason, and that there are different ways to come to this, and that there's not just one path, like as if we all live the same life. And it's nice. It's a refreshing to read that kind of approach after some other texts I've read that can get a little bit frustrating because I feel like I read those and then I kind of dismiss, okay, well, now I can't take fully what they're saying into consideration, or, into consideration, but I don't trust it as much if somebody has that perspective versus
Mhm.
one like this.
Yeah, I get you.
Oh, throw the book. Ah!
Ah.
Okay. Yes, and then went into descriptions of all the different ways. This was interesting to me as
Mhm.
well. Um, saying, well, I think it's fairly obvious to us from the conversations that we've had here, that sometimes suddenly something can happen that's sudden that kind of changes your perspective or causes you to go down this path, like death or illness or something that shifts your life, and it sort of seems naturally to change your perspective. But I really found this an interesting thought,
Mhm.
that when nothing is offered in the way of a spiritual initiation to prove one's entry into the world of men and women, initiation happens instead in the road or the street, in cars at high speed, with drugs, with dangerous sex, with weapons, and
Mm.
that it is rooted in a fundamental truth, a need to grow. And I've I haven't ever really thought of somebody using like driving fast or doing other risky activities as a need to grow.
Yeah. I think yeah, that's an interesting perspective. I think on one hand, I would recognize the statement like everybody longs for something more or a sense of being part of something bigger, right? But to come in at this angle is a little unique.
Yeah, and now I'm not sure I've fully worked through like completely the potential value of that thought, so that's one that I'm going to revisit a little bit more. But this one
Mhm.
really struck me where I was like, huh, not only is that a more compassionate view of these sort of like rash
Mhm.
behaviors that a lot of teenagers or younger adults engage in, and some of them never really leave that space. I mean, I guess that's what it ultimately is. Okay, if they're searching for something and they don't find it there because it's not the right way, that is not the path to get there. But because they don't know, they continue to engage in these things, and then just always at the end, it's like you can't quite get there, right? If it makes sense in that way, but
Yeah, I think it does.
yeah, an interesting thought. Eventually, maybe I'll find something else there, but I was intrigued. Um, then, as many others, talking about death, looking to death and facing the fear of death while you're alive. If we live with death in mind, it changes how we live. Very, very old concept, this one, right? Memento Mori. And then we get into a long and detailed anecdote about Nachiketa and the Lord of Death.
Yeah, I hadn't read this anecdote before in another book, so it was refreshingly different from some of the ones I feel like pop up all the time in these sorts of readings where you know what I
Mm.
mean? You're like,
Yes.
"Ah, this anecdote again."
But at the same time, ultimately we tell stories because they mean something. There's a truth in them, right? Someone's repeating a story because there's a truth in it. And even when we have different characters and different specific events, ultimately they're all the same story, which I think is what he kind of concludes. He says this one because it kind of lays out in a step by step way what the path or that journey is. But I felt like, overall in this chapter, with the many different examples he gives, I kind of
Yeah,
got
you're
the
right.
sense that he's aware of that this is the same story. This one's just easier to look at each individual step, but ultimately that this is kind of an eternal longing or like
Mhm.
necessity of humanity that we do these things. And it does lay it out rather nice. And then he breaks them down again with disenchantment, facing the unknown. I wish I could remember what other places. Hmm. Yes, the importance of forgiveness.
Forgiveness. Bum bum bum. My arch nemesis.
Oh, and there's a couple of little things like this too. Initiation, we give birth to ourselves.
Mhm.
Like we have to die and be reborn. Nachiketa. It's not oh it's thinking of the literal death, but it's a spiritual one.
Yeah.
It's that you have to not only forgive others but also ourselves. I wish I could
I
remember
in
where exactly.
right under the header, oh, this page actually, second paragraph. Forget on the right side. Forgiveness is both a preparation and an end in spiritual life, a theme we return to many times. To forgive, we must face the pain and sorrow of our betrayal and disappointment and discover the movement of heart that opens to forgive in spite of it all. Um, I thought that was a really good turn of phrase. The way he words it is nice. And it was a thoughtful moment for me. I'm always struggling with the theme of forgiveness myself as somebody who is self imposed ostracized from my biological mother. I haven't spoken to her in over a decade.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, this theme of forgiveness, this idea of it can be one I struggle with in discussion because I do promote a lot of like this idea of like be forgiving, don't hold grudges, right? But then I'm also somebody who's made this choice in my life. And so I did find this particular paragraph useful to meditate on, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Actually, the following paragraph as well. This little story was kind of cheeky,
Mhm.
but also, I mean, very accurate to my experience. Um, the, as a compassionate letting go for our own sake as much as for others. He says this is like the meeting of two former prisoners of war. When one asked, "Have you forgiven your captors?" the other replied, "No, never." The first ex prisoner looked with kindness at his friend and said, "Well, then they still have you in prison, don't they?" It was like, yes,
Yeah. Um
exactly.
no, that's absolutely true, right? And but then at what point but that's a whole other minute unnecessary discussion of like, well, what does forgiveness look like in action? Do I have to talk to someone again to have forgiven them?
I don't think so. I think that there can be a separate recognition of having compassion and like a calm. I think like
Mhm.
really the mark of forgiveness is when you feel when you can recall the thing and you can see the person and understand why they are the way they are and accepting that that is
Mhm.
and feeling calm and at peace with what has happened and
Mhm.
with that person and really seeing like the complete trajectory of everything in their life that led them to be that way to inflict pain on others or something, and then
Yeah.
you can also have the recognition that that person, just because you forgive them and you've come to that understanding doesn't mean that they changed, and it
Mhm.
doesn't mean that they will stop doing that again if given the opportunity. And I think we can recognize and accept that somebody, it's never 100% that person's fault for being the way they are,
Yeah.
even if they have control over their actions and that they should be expected to do better. But you can also say, well, this is toxic and this isn't something that's enriching my life, and you know, to be able to also distance yourself from people who aren't doing the things that are the way that we want to live our lives and the
Mhm.
kinds of values that, if you have I think there's a difference in the mindset and then the actual decisions and the actions you take for your own life and also like your family, right? It's a sort of protection if you can recognize this is not an okay way to be.
Right.
I understand why you are that way, and maybe this is something like bigger than ourselves, but that doesn't mean that you necessarily want to expose your child to that or that you want
Mhm.
to expose yourself to that anymore. And there's in my view, it's I think forgiveness doesn't have to be that you go back to that place. I was in a relationship with somebody who ultimately I think was abusive in a lot of like emotionally, verbally, and had isolated
Mhm.
me from people and then stalked me for months after the relationship ended,
Mhm.
and I have PTSD from it, and
Ooh.
I'm like, I mean, I don't think I'm fully there yet. I'm still in the process of like forgiving this person and understanding what things led him to be like that. I think the older I get, the easier it'll be to go, oh, well, that person was young. you
Well,
know.
yeah, the more distance you
But
have between the incident, it's just sometimes um, I find my emotions sometimes are more raw than I anticipate them being
yeah,
when they arise.
Emotions are like that.
How dare they?
kind of the nature of emotions. You know, if they're not very raw, then you probably aren't really having an emotion. But you know, I would never even when I do get. I think I will get to that point where I can forgive this person, but I will never go back to that person. I'll never put myself in that situation again, and I would never put myself in the situation with another person who behaved in the same way either. You know, two separate things.
Good. Yeah.
But I could potentially free myself from the traumatic experience and
Mhm.
loosen that grip that has on me, and so that I get to a point where it doesn't affect my life
Yeah.
anymore. And yeah, I think like that can be forgiveness, but then there's the narrative people use around family is a bit different, right? But I don't think that it has to be like I don't think forgiveness looks like one thing only.
Yeah. Anyway, we don't have to stay on that if you don't want. I was just it's just one of my thoughts while I'm reading this sort of things.
I I feel like that's why we have book club.
Mhm.
I mean, we read the text, and yes, we can talk about the text, and hopefully, we are getting a lot from the direct text. But if it's touching on these things that are our experiences and the things that I mean, ultimately, that's what we're supposed to do, right? Look at
Mhm.
ourselves and our lives and the people around us and life in general and humanity in general and get to understand these truths at the heart of everyone's experience. And if we're here and we're discussing these things and our different views on it and it gets us closer to that goal, then isn't I don't care if this is as far as we get in the chapter, you know. If it had value, if it still has value, then why does it matter?
But then we won't read the book.
Oh, Max, have you read the book?
No,
No.
I think I can see it's very important to you that you read the
it's super important to me.
book.
Max lays awake at night wishing only to read the book.
If only I knew how to read.
If only I could read.
You can only experience the book vicariously through the others of book club.
I put it
Yes.
under my pillow and sleep and hope I can learn that way.
Oh, wouldn't that be great?
If only. If I could like choose a book and that was my dreams for the night because I was uploading the book. Oh, that'd be so good.
Oh, there
Although
was one other thing.
this sounds like a hot way to like increase mental illness.
For sure.
Like I'm suddenly envisioning all the ways to abuse this idea, and I was like, no, oh no.
Ooh, this isn't what I was looking for, but I liked this wording as well. Saying the value of our harshest difficulties is how honestly they cause us to question, how they intensify our courage and bring alive our deepest inner purpose, how they reawaken our soul's task on earth.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, that's a good one.
Hmm.
Ah, okay. I don't have much to elaborate on that one. I just like,
Just like it.
yes.
Yeah.
And that's all a reminder too, because there's so many different aspects to these big events that happen that cause us to evaluate that any one of those could get lost in it as well.
Mhm.
Looking at the others. Ah, okay. Let's see, where was the other one? There
I
was something
offered to
else
let the
related
stray
to
cat
this.
go outside, and he ran away from the door. So I think he does not want to go out.
Oh no, you're stuck with this cat.
Well, I want to see if he has a home first. I don't want to just steal someone's cat. So I
um,
put this little paper collar on him, and I was hoping he'd go back to wherever land for a minute, so someone could like take the collar off and text me if that was their cat.
hmm.
Sweet, sweet wherever land.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
And instead, he ran away from the door like I was about to kick him out of there like a soccer ball. Out into the cold.
Hunt the cat.
Yeah, punt the cat through the
You
door.
kicked me it.
You would kick the kitty?
Tangents.
Sorry. Look, I got a random stray cat I'm trying to figure out, alright?
I know. It's a little bit intrusive, isn't it?
His name is Soft Paws, and I love him.
But he can also be loved from afar.
But I also would be really mad if somebody just stole my cat, so I don't want to do that to someone else's cat.
Yeah. Maybe posting on Facebook.
I'll put him on next door, but I'll probably see if there's a local group that I can also post on Facebook.
Yeah, they have usually like lost pets of such and such city that you
Yeah.
can post a picture, and somebody might be like, "Oh yeah, I know this cat."
Yeah.
They're good. There's some people that just camp in those places. They often will actually know whose pet it is, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
And then if they're chipped, you can take them to the vet or
Well,
whatever.
this cat's not neutered, in which case I suspect
Mhm.
he's not chipped either.
Yeah, fair.
So,
Well, good luck with the
yeah,
cat.
he's still got his balls.
Don't go making more kitties now, cat.
He will not have those balls long if he becomes mine, though. We will be setting up an appointment.
Dun dun dun.
um,
Oh, this part. This actually goes back to again what I was mentioning earlier about why everyone seems to have like there's only one way to do this,
mm-hmm.
and this one so much attitude, but it says with spiritual passion we can awaken no matter where we are. So when one student complained to my teacher Ajahn Chah that in his very busy life he did not have time to meditate, Chah laughed and said, "Do you have time to breathe? If you are determined, you must simply pay attention. This is our practice, wherever we are, whatever is happening. To breathe, to be fully present, to see what is
Absolutely.
true." I'm like, yeah, that's it. Whatever way you want to do that. And if you need to sit down on a cushion and listen to a singing bowl or a gong to remind yourself to do it, then great, do that. And if you can do it
Yeah.
elsewhere, then do that. It doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
But it's also kind of funny. Do you have time to breathe? Oh, snarky.
Ooh, snap. Um, I think in many ways I find a lot of relief knowing that the practice isn't so strict.
Mm-hmm.
Because I
And it
frequently
doesn't
find
have to
myself
be.
going, I don't have time to meditate like everyone else. Everything demands my attention. Um, but yeah, I think there's a lot of truth to be had there of well, can you just be in the moment and breathe?
That's
Yeah.
all it is.
It's a paying attention, right? Just the mindfulness,
Mm-hmm.
ultimately. Actually, there was. I can't remember if it was in one of the books that we read here in book club or if it was one that I read on my own, but one of Thich Nhat Hanh's books, he said something like, for each student, the approach has to be different. Like what one
Yep.
needs to learn is different from another. And so one student you give them sugar, you teach them sweetly, and another one
Yes.
they take bitter medicine to learn the truth.
Yeah. That
And
was in one of the books we read. Yeah.
yeah, I like that a lot. I keep coming back to the I love his images.
They're very good. But it is very true. Yeah, some of us can be taught with soft things, and yeah, it's just interesting how different we can be, and yet ultimately the same.
Mm-hmm. Well, maybe it's the people who are very stubborn or, you know, don't see it already, then they have to be forced. a little bit more, go through something more difficult before they finally get it.
Mhm.
Let's see, here's some examples of different people being dedicated to the spiritual journey.
Mhm.
Um,
I personally didn't highlight anything again until page 55.
yeah, I don't think there were. I mean, most of these are just examples, right? Yeah.
Not to say that it's not good. It's just not stuff I was like, I gotta highlight that.
Yeah, not a lot of one sentence little things. It's just different stories of people being dedicated to the
Mhm.
practice. And actually, I kind of liked this little poem here on 53 where they said
Mm. Mhm.
this last bit. You have not grown old, and it is not too late to dive into your increasing depths where life calmly gives out its own secret.
Ooh, cute. Yeah, that's a good. It is a good little poem.
Yes, and then who am I?
Who are you?
And the different ways that people approach that question,
Mhm.
which some of it I think was basically just that no birth, no death,
Mhm.
and
I also highlighted the part on 55 where it's like, as we awaken, we discover that we are not limited by who we think we are. All the stories we tell ourselves, the judgments, the problems, the whole identity of the small sense of self, the body of fear, can be released in a moment, and a timeless sense of grace and liberation can open for us.
mm-hmm. And that this next one too, that it comes at a price.
Mhm.
The price of letting go all we hold and take ourselves to be, a stripping away until only the eternal remains. You
Mm.
know, the scary bit.
No, nobody wants to think about the scary bit. Just want that sweet, sweet nirvana.
Yeah, but this is always the many different ways that people come to it. Every different example. It's like, well, this one they did this, and this one did a totally different thing, and this one it was simple. It's just asking the question, and this one that has to go through again, like such a long process,
Mhm.
and that all different religions have some version of this. Is another main point I think of this section. Like he's talking
Yeah.
about Buddhism, but then he talks about, oh well, in Christianity it's like this,
Mhm.
and oh, one Sufi master describes it like this, and people always saying they felt like they died, or that some part of them has died, and ultimately, like we have to face death.
Mhm.
Here, wasn't it this? Death and birth are not separate. Renewal comes by dying. When we have faced death and aloneness, we are unafraid to live, and life flowers under our feet. Everywhere we go becomes holy ground.
Mm. Yeah, that one's good.
Yeah, was that's as far as I read for today because I figured it was long enough. But
Same.
I think it was good. I still feel like pretty good about this book.
Oh yeah, I'm
Um,
enjoying the book. It was nice to sit down with it again after I hadn't touched it for a little bit. Um, and I still feel really good about it.
mhm.
I'm enjoying it too.
Good.
Yay!
That's important. You are also part of book club.
I'm important too.
Yeah.
Um, so you and I are using the same copy. That archive spot you check yours out from is a 2000 a year 2000 publication.
hmm
And but mine is used, and I got it from this bookstore, and there's like a thing written in the front, and I just think it's so sweet. It says to Cheryl, "This seems to say it all. I have a copy too to read after the laundry, work, life. Let's always keep looking for the ecstasy in each day. Love, Deb."
Aww.
And I'm just like, "Aw, look at that. That's sweet."
Do you think that Cheryl died and somebody just donated all her books to the.
Something like that must have happened. I don't know, but I liked a little sweet indication of history there for the book. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It was just kind of interesting. Cute little thing in the front of my copy.
Mm. The wholesome glimpse into the lives of other people.
Yeah. Like I don't know who Cheryl and Deb are, but they seemed like they had a very sweet friendship or
Yeah.
more. I don't know. No, I'm not here to judge. Like, but it was just a sweet moment, and I was like, "Oh."
Yeah.